Good afternoon. Welcome into another edition of the PowerMizzou.com podcast here on YouTube. If you're joining us live or wherever you might be listening to us later on, you can get it at all your major podcast platforms. Appreciate you joining us. Leave a nice comment, share it on social media, do all those things. Want to remind you every single week our preview and post-game shows brought to you by America's oldest brewery, Yuengling. I did some checking for you guys, so you don't have to do it. If you are traveling to Columbia, South Carolina, Yuengling is available in South Carolina. You can pick some up on your way to Williams-Brice Stadium before Mizzou and South Carolina kick off at 3:15. If you're sitting at your house watching on TV in the Show Me State, you can obviously get it there too. We encourage you to do so. Pick some up before the game. And as always, 3 hours later, you might want some in celebration. You might want some in despair, but you're going to want some. This is the Yuengling opponent preview show. The opponent this week, South Carolina. And so we are bringing on Hale McGranahan from the Big Spur. That is the 24/7 site that covers South Carolina. Hale, how you doing, man?
Gabe, I'm doing well. I can vouch for the Yuengling definitely being available here in South Carolina.
There you go. We always like that. We support the sponsors, and hey, look, as we always say every week, both fan bases are going to want some after the game, regardless of how it goes down. So before we get into this game specifically, I'm curious about this series for South Carolina fans. I know there have been some media members over the past couple of years that have made headlines with their feelings about this game, but is this one that South Carolina fans just really look at and I've got to imagine it kind of sticks in their craw over the last 4 or 5 years.
It's not even just the last 4 or 5 years. I think really since Missouri's gotten into the league and the success that program's had in such a short time, I think if you got some truth serum instead of Yuengling into some Carolina fans, they'd probably tell you they're a little jealous of the success Missouri's had during that time. But yeah, especially these last 5, more specifically since Eli Drinkwitz has been the head coach there, he has also kind of ruffled some feathers, no pun intended, around here back to when he was the head coach at App State and they beat Carolina at Williams-Brice. So yeah, this is absolutely a game that a lot of our readers at the Big Spur definitely want to get, especially because Missouri's won so frequently here.
Right. Regardless of what else Eli Drinkwitz does well or poorly, he is very good at ruffling feathers. That I can that I can vouch for. I've said, like, eventually we all think we're going to this 9-game schedule and maybe 3 permanent opponents and all that. Like, we know Missouri's going to get Oklahoma. We know they're going to get Arkansas. I said I'd love South Carolina to be the third one because they're 2 teams without like a huge natural rival. But like, this has been a really good series. I think the fan bases kind of hate each other. I'm not sure the coaches right now necessarily love each other. I think it would be a really good third opponent for both of them. I'm not sure how that would go over with South Carolina fans.
I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, in college football these days, it seems like there's been a lot of teams or leagues trying to create rivalries and make something out of nothing. And this one has just kind of naturally formed into a rivalry. And it just so happens that I guess the reason why the SEC tried to make Columbia versus Columbia a thing, it's kind of stuck. And I think that's more a credit to how things have played out on the field. So I don't think a lot of Carolina fans would hate that, but if you had to ask them, I would say that if they could guarantee themselves an opponent every year, that Vanderbilt would definitely be on that list. So where Missouri falls in that category, I don't know. But there's definitely a mutual distaste for Missouri.
Vanderbilt, I think, was a popular submission when everybody said, give us the 3 teams you want to play. All of a sudden, Vanderbilt less fun to play. This South Carolina team, though, I mean, coming into the year, I think people outside the state of South Carolina were mostly looking and going, hey, is Shane Beamer going to do enough to save his job? Now we're nine weeks into the season. South Carolina's playing about as well as anybody in this league. I mean, I know everybody has hopes before the season, but did people in South Carolina did they think this team had this capability?
No, not many. And I tell you what, Gabe, I was one of the more optimistic folks who follow this team. I was on the more optimistic end of things before the season. I mean, a lot of people got pretty down on them after 5-7 last year. And what I was kind of saying in the lead up to the season was I thought they were going to be better because they were going to be better on both lines of scrimmage, especially the defensive side of the ball, where they didn't really have much in terms of a pass rush last year. I was like, hey, they're going to be pretty good over there. I don't know how much better they're going to be, but they're going to be better, and it's going to help them win some more games. I could not, I not in a million years would I have said they would have been this good. Like I did not think that. So I was kind of wrong in a way. I mean, even Shane Beamer this week, when somebody asked him about like surprises for his team, he was like Kyle Kennard, the defensive end, who's one of the most productive pass rushers in the country. He's like, I thought he was good and going to be a good player for us, but even Shane didn't even see it coming with that guy. So yeah, surprising that they're as good as they are on defense, and there were definitely some people around this fan base who were pretty down on where things were trending. And obviously it's a week to week thing. If Missouri comes in and wins here in 2 days, some of those folks will probably be like, "See, I told you." But by and large, I think this team's exceeded expectations, regardless of how folks kind of saw the team performing this year.
You mentioned Kennard, and I'd kind of forgotten. I can't remember the exact way it went down, whether he was supposed to visit Missouri after he visited Carolina or whether he actually did take the visit. But I know Missouri really wanted him to. And so that's another little, and it seems like that happens every week now with the transfer portal. Like there's somebody that either played on the other team or visited the other team or whatever. Outside of him, though, I mean, I think this is the best front seven in the SEC. And if it's the best front seven in the SEC, there's a decent chance it's the best front seven in the country. I mean, outside of him, obviously, look, they're good across the board, but what really makes it go?
Yeah, it's the guys on the edge. So Kennard, obviously, Dylan Stewart, the freshman, who was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. Talk about a guy who's exceeded expectations. Like, obviously, people thought he was going to be really good if he's a 5-star, but I mean, he's been great, and it's been those two guys for sure. And on the interior, they've got 3 players who've been a part of this program since at least 2020. So they're real old inside, and they're good too. Like T.J. Sanders and Tonka Hemingway are legit NFL draft prospects. Alex Huntley, good player as well, and played a ton of ball over the years. And they brought in a transfer, DeAndre Jules from Pittsburgh, who's been out the last few weeks, but it's looking like he's going to play this weekend against Missouri. Then a linebacker, they're good and deep as well. They had Debo Williams back, who was all SEC last year. Bam Martin Scott, who's been with the program since 2021, really started to come on last season. Then they went and got some transfers, and Demetrius Knight, who played at Charlotte, started his career at Georgia Tech. Get this, he was on the same team as Kyle Kennard and Jahmyr Gibbs, and for some reason their head coach couldn't keep his job. So Demetrius Knight has been arguably the second best player on the defense, if not better at times than even Kennard. So it's just they're old, they're deep, they're talented, and they just play a good team oriented brand of football too. It's a lot of fun to watch those guys.
When you've got that much ability up front, especially on the edge, like you don't have to blitz a lot. You can get pressure with 4, which helps your secondary. I mean, the secondary, how much does it benefit from what Carolina does up front? But also, like, I mean, is it a secondary that's good because it gets that help, or are there good players on that back end as well?
Yes to both of those questions. It's a good secondary. It's pretty much all the same guys that they had last year, and they had some troubles last year, but a lot of those issues were as a result of not having much of a pass rush. It's just remarkable how much better they are. Just looking at the stats, from sack numbers from last year to this year, it's eye-popping, and that certainly helped the secondary. But they're really talented too. They have an awesome safety in Nicky Manwari, who's 3-year starter and probably going to go pro after this season. Jalen Kilgore, who plays nickel, who's really good too. They have O'Donnell Fortune at cornerback, who's multi-year starter and been around forever. So they're old and experienced and talented and deep too, as we saw last week with Peyton Williams, who came in and playing for DQ Smith, who got injured during warmups. Another multi-year starter who's been around for a while. So those guys are pretty good too, but they are absolutely helped by that front 6, 7, however it's constructed, and what they bring in the pass rush.
Last one on the defensive side. I mean, nobody's really gotten them. Ole Miss put up 27, but Ole Miss is used to putting up 45. Bama scored 27. The only team that's done better than that is LSU, that scored 36. So, I mean, if there's been a vulnerability, if there was something in that LSU game, what was it? What kind of got South Carolina there that hasn't happened in other games?
They had a little bit of issue keeping up with all the playmakers when those guys were on the field at the same time. All those receivers and the tight end Taylor and Garrett Nussmeier was playing really well at that point too. Not like he has these last couple of weeks. That was an issue. That's kind of a loaded question because of the way that game played out and some of the plays that happened that like 2 pick sixes got called back for that South Carolina had, and that had an effect. I mean, LSU obviously put up some points and some yards, but I mean, I don't know. It was tough keeping up with all their playmakers, and if there's maybe a little bit of reason for concern for this Missouri game, it's that everyone around here knows who Missouri's playmakers are, knows that those guys are talented. In Weiss and Luther Burden and those 2 backs and Norfleet. So that's a little bit of an eyebrow raiser for me is Carolina being able to count for everybody.
All right, so look, when you've got one side of the football that's really good, obviously the other side of the football probably doesn't get a ton of attention. I watch it now. I'm going to take you way back here. You may not be. I don't know kind of how old you are, how long you've been watching Carolina football, but South Carolina did play this kid. The first time I saw Lenora Sellers play, part of it's the number, but like I looked at him and said, he looks like Brad Smith moving on the football field, former Missouri quarterback. And the first time I really watched him play extended was the A&M game. A&M had to have set a program record for missed tackles in that game. I mean, just as a runner, how tough is this kid?
Yeah, I think he had like 5 or 6 on one play too, missed tackles. He's tough, man, and he's big too. I don't know that it necessarily comes across on the TV screen, but he's a legit 6'3", like 240, 245. Like he's a put together dude, and he's fast. He's tough, obviously. I mean, he's played through a couple injuries already this season. I mean, just that one play I'm referring to against.
I think we may have briefly lost Hale, so I'm going to cover for just a minute and let him know that his connection dropped, and see if we can get him back on to finish up talking Mizzou, South Carolina. But talking, hang on one second. Okay, this is the beauty of live media and live TV, right? Okay. Hale is back now. We brought you back. You were frozen up there on my screen, but I saw you start moving again, so we brought you back on. But again, this is what happens when you go live and rely on technology. So you're talking about Sellers, and he gets a ton of the attention, obviously. I think, tell me if this is wrong. I think the biggest difference between what South Carolina is now and what we thought they might be at the beginning of the season was Rocket Sanders looks like Rocket Sanders of 2 years ago. And I'm not sure that's something anybody knew coming into the year.
Yeah, that was kind of part of my preseason thought was like, all right, if he's anywhere close to that, this offense is going to go. But, we won't really know till we see it. And we saw it in that LSU game for sure, mostly in the first half when Sellers was out there and healthy. and playing, then obviously it's happened again these last couple weeks against A&M and Vanderbilt. So um, things are clicking at the right time for this offense, and Rocket Sanders looking a whole lot like the guy who was at Arkansas in 22 and even I guess 21 a little bit. That it's no coincidence that they're playing well and he's playing well too.
Obviously, it's easier said than done because if you could just do it, people would have been doing it. But if you can slow that, if somebody can slow that South Carolina run game down and make Lenora Sellers beat them from the pocket, can he do it?
That's still up in the air, and some of that I think is because of what they've got at receiver. It's not the best group. I mean, if I'll put it like this, if Luther Burden and Theo Weiss were the receivers for South Carolina, I think we'd be talking about a team that's higher in the rankings, has at least one more win already, and a quarterback with some better passing numbers than he has right now. So yeah, while I don't want to make it all sound like it's just the receivers, because Sellers just had some growing pains on his own and been learning. So some of it's a product of them just not being like super talented at receiver. I mean, they've got some pretty good players and some talented guys. Don't get me wrong, but it's not upper echelon of the SEC. And we've seen over the years a lot of good receivers at South Carolina, and they just don't quite have that right now.
Look, obviously, any team coached by someone from the Beamer family is going to put an emphasis on special teams. Honestly, Missouri's hasn't been very good this year. Maybe could be, I think, more competitive than the 13-point spread. I think special teams could be big. Is that do you see that as a decided South Carolina advantage this weekend?
I have noticed that, and going back and looking at some of Missouri's games on YouTube, I like to just kind of look at those like highlight reels that they put together, and I did notice that there were some kind of like like moments for Missouri on special teams. So I'm sure Shane Beamer is very well aware of that too. Obviously, that goes without saying. So yeah, I think with them, it's just going to come down to a matter of like how tricky do they want to try to get? Do they are they going to try to force the envelope or force the issue with some things, push the envelope, or are they just going to play it kind of straight up? And that'll be kind of just something we kind of have to wait and see. I mean, they've messed around and done some stuff with kickoffs. That I don't know if folks who are listening saw the onside kick they did against Alabama, but it was kind of unique. And they set it up and tried to do something off of that against A&M, and ended up kicking it out of bounds. But I think there's still a possibility there, whether they try to do it this week or sit on it till the Clemson game. But yeah, they're always tweaking something on special teams, and if you don't watch them every week, maybe you're not going to notice if you're a Missouri fan. But that's certainly something I'm keeping an eye on. As somebody who obviously covers the team and watches them closely each week, is something kind of goofy on special teams might get pulled out of the bag, or maybe not. Maybe they're just so focused on like, hey, let's try to play this game straight up and win because we haven't won it in a while. Like, forget all the nonsense. Let's just go play football. So I could see it kind of both ways.
Yeah, you mentioned the Clemson game, and between Missouri and Clemson, South Carolina's got Wofford. So I mean, as much momentum as they've had going, this still feels. I mean, look, 7-5's in play and 9-3's in play, right? How big is Saturday for whatever this season becomes for South Carolina?
Well, I think if you'd ask most South Carolina fans right now, they'd be disappointed with anything less than 9-3. I mean, obviously Wofford's a win. Being a 12, 13-point favorite at home against Missouri, like, can't lose that game. No offense to Missouri. It's still got a lot of good players and all that, but it's a game you shouldn't lose, obviously. Then Clemson, regardless of how good or bad you are, or how good or bad they are, there's no excuse there. It's either you win or you lose, and you're happy or you're not. So all that adds up to there are going to be some people who are going to be pissed if they're not 9-3 here in 3 weeks. So that's just kind of how it goes. I mean, the way of the world, and a lot of those people were probably talking about this being a 4 or 5-1 team 3 months ago.
You mentioned that 12.5 point line. Did that surprise you at all? I mean, it was a couple. I thought South Carolina would probably be 9.5, 10 is what I thought. It was maybe a field goal more than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was going to be closer to a touchdown. I thought it would have been a little more than a touchdown, but yeah, that 12-13 has caught me by surprise. But I don't know, Gabe, so Missouri's offensive line, the center's out, and is the left guard out too? Is that right?
Well, the left guard, we don't know. Truthfully, I'm not sure the left guard matters a whole lot because the backup, like, I don't think there's a big difference between the starter and the backup there. The center, clearly it matters. The quarterback, look, we have no idea. I mean, Alabama game, we were pretty sure he'd play. Oklahoma, we were pretty sure he wasn't. I think there's a chance Brady Cook is back, and I'm curious, if Shane Beamer talked much about, hey, whether they're expecting one guy or the other, or they just say, hey, we prepare for the scheme, and whoever they put back there, they put back there.
Yeah, I think they're kind of taking that approach, but part of me wonders if they're like, doesn't really matter, because I think they're probably kind of similar in terms of what they offer athletically and what they're going to have to sort of deal with that pass rush. So to them,
right. That's the thing to me is without your starting center. Look, I think the goal for Missouri at quarterback here is whoever's back there, get him out of this game alive and relatively healthy. If you can keep it a low scoring game and pull out a couple plays and give yourself a shot. To me, here's what this game is. Missouri there's nothing scientific about this. Missouri's 8-0 in one-score games the last 2 years. To me, Missouri just goes into this one and just goes, give us a one-possession game with 6 minutes left, and we think we're going to win. And that's not because it's something that's anybody. They think they're going to win any game. So to me, Missouri's whole goal in this is get to the fourth quarter and have a shot.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize they were that good in that type of game. I don't know. The thing to me is like where I could see it going over the 12 or 13 point spread being more than that is like South Carolina has been obviously really good at getting defensive scores, and that's not something that like you want to really like feel good about predicting is going to happen any given week, but they've gotten a lot, and a couple of, like I said earlier, have come off the board too, and that's mostly attributed to the pass rush being as ridiculous as it's been. So I don't know. I'm in a pretzel. I'll say that. I don't know if I want to take Carolina to cover or take it to be a close game, but I do think they'll win. I'll say that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, and like I think the spread's not unfair, given kind of the direction of these two teams and the fact that we have no idea really still who's going to play quarterback for Missouri on Saturday. So, Hale, appreciate you taking some time in. We'll point everybody to read the coverage from the other side over at the BigSpur.com, the 24/7 site for South Carolina, and we'll catch up with you down the road, Ben. Let us know if we can do anything for you.
Likewise, Gabe. I appreciate you having me. Thank you, sir.
All right, have a good one. That is Hale McGranahan from the Big Spur, the 24/7 site on the South Carolina Network. Want to remind you guys on 24/7, you can read not only all the stories, but all the message boards of opposing teams. So you want to see what South Carolina fans are saying? They've got a good active site. I went over there this morning. If you want to check that out, go over to their premium message board, and you can see what South Carolina fans think. And, look, I don't think the take is unfair that this is a game South Carolina expects to win. They're favored by 12.5 points. I mean, that's like about what the spread was, if I remember correctly, between, Mizzou and Boston College, maybe. Mizzou might have been a little bit bigger favorite against Boston College. But point being, South Carolina is playing as well as anybody in the SEC. I understand why the line is what it is. Again, if you're Missouri, they said it last week. Hey, we don't lose close games. I think if you're Missouri, you just go into this thing, give us a close game in the fourth quarter. We'll take our chances. Whoever your quarterback is, keep him upright. And you got to rely on Burden and Weiss to do what Burden and Weiss did last week, which was go win you a football game when you have the chance. So 3:15 SEC Network on Saturday. Missouri's permanent home appears to be on the SEC network. Appreciate all you guys joining us for the preview show here this week. We'll be back on post game somewhere around 7 o'clock Saturday night. That's also going to be brought to you by Yuengling. Again, it is available in the fine state of South Carolina. So if you're making the trip, and I just said this earlier, I highly recommend this trip. Williams-Brice Stadium is one of the most underrated atmospheres I've covered a game at. I think it's a great place to go watch a game. Tailgating scene is phenomenal. South Carolina fans have always been very hospitable. At least prior to kickoff. Once the game kicks off, nobody's hospitable in the SEC. But go down, enjoy the weekend, pick yourself up some Yuengling. If you're not making the trip, grab it and just watch on TV with the rest of us and join me on the post-game show Saturday night. So before you leave here, do me a favor, like, comment, share, subscribe, do all those things. If you're listening on the podcast, I'll get that up here shortly. Please leave a nice comment, share it on social media. Appreciate you guys hanging out. Thanks to Hale for taking some time. And we will talk to you next time here on the PowerMizzou.com podcast.